Howdy y'all, and welcome back to Iamachampion Paralympics Edition. So I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about some of my favorite shows that dealt with disabilities because, well, it's Paralympics right now. And some of which are able to be seen whether by buying DVDs or streaming, and one of which I'm not sure is still available. Now, I will confess that I've been having a lot of pain over the last few days and major setbacks, so I'm on pain medication that make it hard for my memory to work really well. So I'm not going to mention actors' names because I'm going to miss somebody's name. And please just bear with me if I stumble. Okay, so the first show is the oldest show. It was called Life Goes On. I can remember that the main character who had Down syndrome was named Corky. Or Kirky. I could never quite understand what they were saying about his name. But his character had Down syndrome, and he had two sisters in the show, one older, one younger. And I believe it started when he was in high school. The character was in high school. But I don't really remember because I believe it started before I was really watching it. But it did definitely deal with the realities of how he felt about being disabled and how other people treated him and also how his family dealt with it. And I don't recall the show beforehand really dealing with that. Now, they didn't heavy-hand it to my knowledge, at least my understanding at the time, but they were real about it. It is difficult navigating in a non-disabled world when you have a highly disabled child, especially when that disability is mocked mercilessly by several people in your area. So it really dealt with the realities of that, and even what the younger sister struggled with, at some points being resentful of this older brother who had disabilities taking away attention from her and time from her life, but yet she loved him at the same time. And that struggle within her of what was going on. And I don't, like I said, remember any other show that was being honest about this. And it was kind of mind-blowing to me at the time. Now, I'm not Down syndrome, and I didn't have any friends, to my knowledge, in that period of my time that were. But it really hit home to me seeing a show deal with this topic and dealing with it so well. It was very hopeful, it was very helpful, and it started a lot of conversations about how we treat people with those kind of disabilities. The second show didn't center around the character with disabilities, but rather he was part of the show and his character dealt with things. It was called Joan of Arcadia. It was, I believe, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it mostly centered around Joan, but her older brother in the show, before the timeline of the show started, had an accident and became paralyzed from the waist down. And I believe it was not long before the timeline of the beginning of the show. So it deals with him having been an athlete, very outgoing, very adventurous kind of, young man, to suddenly being paralyzed from the waist down and figuring out life now as a very disabled person. And the extreme change that is. It dealt with his depression, with his doubts and concerns, with wondering what it would be like to be a man with no legs and to provide for himself, let alone another person. And it was something I hadn't seen, with maybe the exception of Life Goes On, being dealt with. But it was real. And I was blown away by that. I still remember very vividly one episode where he's kind of ready to give up on things because he doesn't understand how he can be active without legs. And he used to be so active, he was an athlete. And somebody introduces him to wheelchair basketball. And And my mind was blown because I hadn't heard of wheelchair basketball, or at least I hadn't seen it ever presented. And I just was flabbergasted as somebody who, yes, I wasn't paralyzed from the waist down, but I had been told I would never walk again a few times and had to really deal with the emotions of, what if this is true? What if I can't walk again? And what does this look like moving forward? And watching somebody on TV actually deal with that, and then seeing how the characters had the family members deal with that. And it was done so honestly. It wasn't done for shock or awe. It was done honestly and respectfully. And so if you ever are able to get your hands on that series, I highly recommend it. I have the DVD set of the whole series, but I don't know if they're still available anymore because I bought them like right after the show finished airing or during this airing of the show. And the third show was an ABC Family show. Now, I will caution to anyone watching this that this is, in my opinion, not a family show. ABC Family, at the time that it was airing, liked to push a lot of boundaries, especially sexually. So I was not a fan of that. Several times I would stop watching or try and see if there was an episode 3 or 4 further that stopped doing that. But what I liked about the show was that one of the main characters, one of the sisters that was switched at birth, did I forget to mention it was called Switched at Birth? Remember, I told you I'm on pain medication. She is deaf. And the two of the main characters were, as the show is titled, Switched at Birth. And one ended up being deaf in childhood and one isn't. And they end up deciding to merge their families and dealing with hearing world and deaf world. And it was really, when they talked about the disabilities, they even talked about Down syndrome. It was very well done. I really liked the character episodes, that really dug into that world. And they hired real deaf actors, so they didn't just hire a bunch of people who could sign. They hired deaf actors to make it as realistic as possible. They had many people involved in the show that were well known for being part of the deaf community, a big part of the deaf community, including, I hope I don't mess up her name, Marlee Matlin. And they even talked about Gallaudet University and several other things that really were a breath of fresh air to hear someone talking about and presenting that on television. And the difficulties of navigating a hearing world as a deaf person was really well dealt with. So anyways, that is still, I believe, available to stream. I can't remember if it's on Netflix or Amazon. If you want to find Life Goes On, the first season is available to own, but I do not believe they have ever released the rest of the season still. Boo, they should. You may even be able to find 1 or 2 episodes on YouTube. And as for Joan of Arcadia, I don't know if you can still get your hands on any episodes or not, but if you can, please let me know in the comments. Also, if you see any other information about the other 2 I mentioned, again, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. I hope I wasn't rambling too much. God bless. Go out there and be a champion and enjoy the Paralympics. Ciao for now.